Welcome to the Shift Report, the podcast from MCentric and the MCentric Foundation. MCentric is the go-to information and resources hub designed exclusively for the emergency medicine community. We regularly host key leaders from the field who share their insights and experience. Our goal is to inform our listeners and to encourage you to use what you learn to improve your practice and improve yourself. To learn more, please visit us at mcentric.org. Today's episode is sponsored by Lotus Clinician Wellbeing. Lotus Clinician Wellbeing provides consulting services designed to prioritize clinician wellness in order to provide the best care for their patients. Lotus Clinician Wellbeing supports healthcare professionals with personalized coaching and consulting services for groups and individuals in areas such as career development, leadership, burnout prevention, practice management, and more. For more information, visit lotusclinicianwellbeing.com. Today, we welcome Patrick McCarville. Dr. McCarville lives and works in the Washington, D.C. area. Early in his career as an emergency physician, he's already become what is known as a serial entrepreneur. That term means different things to different people, but he's identified a number of problems and new technologies to try to solve them while working a busy clinical schedule. He'll tell us a bit about the highs and lows of trying to start new ventures with. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Till. I'm excited to talk with you about what I've been through and what I'm looking to accomplish.
Yeah, you're working on a number of interesting areas, and as you know from our podcasts on the Shift Report, we've hosted a number of entrepreneurs who shared their stories of growth along with a few of their challenges, and they all have them. Some are probably more open about talking about those than others. You're at an earlier stage in your business development, and you've tried a number of things from plantain chips to AI. We're going to explore a number of those adventures today. And your current venture, which I know a bit about, and we're going to talk a bit about, is ClearSight AI. And that sounds very interesting. And we're going to get to that and where it's going. But I want to start with some of your earlier ventures and what you've learned. So we're going to start with the non-clinical one first. Tell us a bit about the plantain chip venture and how that started, what your interest is, and how that went.
So the plantain business started out of just sort of passion and love I had for food, and I did the Peace Corps in Cameroon, so it was actually a Cameroonian-inspired plantain chip. It was, you kind of talk about my path to get to medicine was different through Peace Corps and everything, but so was, my timing. I did Peace Corps during COVID, so there was a lot of burnout, and finding secondary interest was really important for me to have an outlet that wasn't just in the hospital during the COVID time. So my co-founder and I, my friend I made in Cameroon, we were cooking plantain cookouts and our Cameroonian cookouts and having people over, and people kept on asking where they could get this. And we both went to each other and were like, well, why don't we start a company? And so we actually started selling Cameroonian hot sauce, just sort of to friends and family. And there's a lot of great feedback. I knew nothing at all about the food industry. Most of the people who do a consumer packaged good like this were either chefs or cooks or things like that. So started doing a lot of background research and reaching out to my sort of LinkedIn network to find anyone I knew who was even in this industry. One of my old high school friends, Dan White, actually had a company called Locavore. He was in Maine and New Hampshire, and he recommended me checking out some food accelerators, which I didn't even know existed. There's one in DC called Union Kitchen Accelerator, and we applied as a Cameroonian-inspired sort of multiple food products, and one of them was the plantain chip. And this was such a great experience to be part of an accelerator. We were accepted in there and really, taught you about, marketing, getting your food out there, but all then the back end things that are really scary, like getting licensing, finding a commercial kitchen, and how to do all those steps and then sell and distribution. So overall for me, it was a great experience. It was something I had no expertise in, but was able to launch a chip, and we got into over 15 grocery stores in the Washington, D.C. area. Unfortunately, and a big sort of learning experience for this was me and my partner reached a point where due to life circumstances, neither of us could take on that full-time role. And we had to outsource some of our manufacturing. And as you learn, if you ever read on Union Kitchen, it's, one of the points they harp on is you want to own your manufacturing, or any industry, you want to own what you can control, because then you can be flexible and adapt. And then, prices went up. Our actually sales were going up as well, but we weren't able to fill orders. And, kind of came to the conclusion that we're not able to take that second leap in this industry that you needed. So we closed down late last year, but overall, I mean, it was an amazing experience. I learned so much, and I'm able to apply a lot of that information I had to my other more medical endeavors.
That's a great story. There are I almost lost count of the things in that story that were important to unpack in business development and business growth. One that struck me early on as you were discussing this was the use of LinkedIn and networking. One of the at MCentric, we have looked at the way that physicians network, and in many cases, we're not very good at it as physicians. Tell us a bit about just what you use LinkedIn for, how it works, how you found people, and how physicians can use it to build businesses.
Um, so for networking, I think the first thing is to just not have a fear that you're like, I don't know, putting people out. The first step is just reaching out to people. So I, I've been blown away now with LinkedIn, looking at my old like friends and high school, the cool things they're doing that I haven't communicated with in years. That when we get together, we're still well, I'll meet them in person if I'm back in Chicago or something like that, and we'll still hit it off. So finding I've been surprised at who's been helpful at different stages with my different interests. So I just kind of go through first my network that I have on there, and kind of been blown away at what people are doing, and like, oh, you got a job in AI, or you've actually founded a company. Like, can we just have 10 minutes to sit down and talk on what your experiences are in that company? I always end a conversation is, do you have anyone else I can talk to? Like sort of putting people on there like, hey, I have this interest. Are there anyone else that you think might be helpful to me? And it's sort of that question. And I learned that through one of my iCore classes in customer feedback and introduction, how to get more customers, is allowed me to meet new people. And then I build that off of, finding them and then getting a little bit more into the industry that I'm working at, because for some reason I keep on picking industries that I don't have great expertise in, and I really need to network. And so that's something I'm doing right now in AI, and something that I've done previously with clinical education and other things, is finding those networks and just keeping on diving as much as you can.
That's great, and I think those are very important pieces of advice for physicians and anyone using the business networking tools that are LinkedIn. LinkedIn occasionally can act a little bit like Facebook, but for networking and finding people, it's a great way to find your primary contacts, find out what they're doing, and then reach out to secondary and tertiary. That's a great lesson that you're continuing to learn. Moving to more clinical applications, and I'll admit that I heard about this one early on, and makes perfect sense to me clinically, as many things do. You work primarily solo on a non-invasive blood pressure device, and as we take care of very sick patients who in the emergency department are moving on to the ICU, they need pretty invasive arterial lines to monitor their blood pressure continuously, as do other patients. And the cuffs that we use are somewhat unreliable and not very comfortable, and we're sometimes not sure about the numbers we're getting. So the idea of having a non-invasive blood pressure device, similar to kind of the pulse ox simple thing on a finger that we have now, strikes many of us as a good one. You went through a journey of trying to develop that, and it was called Expulsus. What'd you learn from that? And tell us a bit about how that developed and how that's guiding you in what you're doing now.
Yeah, so like you said, Expulsa started with my, again, most of my medical adventures start with a problem I have in the emergency department. And this started where during residency, I would review cardiac arrests, and we would give educational feedback to the other residents at GW. And we kept on finding an issue. People actually struggled with finding pulses during codes. And I'm like, why can't we have a manual device that does this? So I started, I learned from some other things I've done where I need to work more on customer interview and getting customers. So started doing feedback and seeing if this was a problem that other people felt. And it was, and did customer interview with an iCore class. And so we moved on from there to building out a prototype device. Unfortunately, what I didn't learn at this stage is I was doing this all solo, and I did not have any technical background or being able to build this myself, meaning this was very expensive. I found developing a group to build it out, and we had a prototype device, and we got some great research. We were able to publish, do a presentation at Chest over the past year, how this device, could get a waveform that could then be analyzed to blood pressure. What I learned from this sort of experience in the process was, for me, being a solo co-founder while trying to do a relatively full-time role was not possible. And I didn't really understand the expense of medical devicing. So being lawyer costs, patent fees, getting the device going, and then the research. And so when I started out early, I was heavily reliant on trying to get government funding, NSF grants and things like that, which unfortunately didn't come through. So the X-Pulses isn't fully shut down, but I've stepped back and I'm looking for really who would be a good co-founder, someone who could take on the building and the constant iterations that need to happen when you're on a device, and see where we can go with that. But it's, again, like all these, it's been a great learning experience, and excited to see what it could become, but for now, it needs to be put on the back burner because it's not sustainable as a solo founder.
For listeners, I would encourage you to reach out to Patrick if this is something that interests you, because who knows what might happen from a contact who has those exact resources that you need to build this. Because I think the need has not been met yet, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and the early research has been great. I've done 2 iterations on SBR NSF grants, and the feedback is there. It needs more data, and that sort of medical research kind of field in the devices is just an expensive process when you're not building and iterating on your own. And so something I learned, and I'm so happy that I went with it because a lot of that networking to get here is led me to other really cool projects.
That's great. So let's talk a bit about AI. You can't go to a business conference, a digital health conference, a clinical conference, pick up a magazine or read an article online without seeing something about AI. It's all around us. It's part of our reality. I don't think many people understand it all that well, but it's there and potentially has game-changing effects in medicine in lots of ways. You have learned about that and have now founded ClearSight AI. We'd love to hear about this, and you've made a somewhat broad request for advice and feedback for this, and tell us what your strategy is on that.
So again, this company started out of a problem I had. I don't know about you, but we don't have radiologists at night at my shop. And hand x-rays for me, especially early on out of residency, just always, I was always wanting someone else to look at this, even though I was pretty sure, I'm like, there's no fractures there, but, high litigation and high concern. And I was, in my back of my head, I'm like, why don't I have something that, could give me a second set of eyes on this or an assist? And, I'd heard about AI and I heard AI in radiology. So I wanted to dive in and sort of look at this problem. And I did a lot of, proof of concept and what AI can do in radiology. I think there's a lot of misconceptions with AI, especially in the medical field, of taking over people's jobs or how much it can actually do. And there is a lot of limitations on what AI can do. I don't think the research I did, AI can't fully read X-rays to print out like a radiologist. It doesn't have the ability to be that precise. But what it can do is highlight areas that are high concern or don't fit its normal. And I was like, this is a perfect tool for ER providers, frontline providers, to just have a second set of eyes so they can train and don't miss anything. So the idea is just an app on your phone that's quick and easy, that you take a picture of an x-ray. It then produces a heat map of where there might be abnormalities. Then the provider can relook at that x-ray and be like, oh, actually, I didn't see that little area over there, and I'm not relooking at it. So it's more of a second set of eyes. I did a lot different with this project than I have in previous projects. The first thing, besides for the research, the proof of concept, to make sure this was a problem that could be solved, is I found I had a technical co-founder come on my team. this, could be a talk on you're going on a while, how you find a co-founder and all that, but I use Y Combinator's co-founder match. I interviewed 5 to 10 people. We just sat down, talked about my problems. A lot of them had medical things they were working on. So it was a really cool experience. I'm actually still having conversations with people about things they want to try to fix, and I'm just sort of advising for free because it's trying to help them out. I found someone who worked really well with me, and we did the background AI algorithm together, and we're able to do that. And now we're building out, before building out the MVP, I reached out to a lot of my networks and see if there's interest in customers and consumers. I have a wait list over 100 providers. We did a questionnaire to see what the need is. I mean, 90% of these people have said that there's concern for missing things on x-rays, and over 50% that said there's a concern for litigation costs with them reading x-rays on their own. So we found that there's a need for there. So we're going to launch our MVP in the next couple months, and then sort of iterate from there and hopefully get good product market fit and either fundraise or self-fund, or we'll figure all that out as we're going.
So you use a number of terms there. I'm going to ask you to define one, and then talk about another one. The one to define is MVP, which I know what that means, but it's a business term. And then talk a bit about product market fit and what that means for you.
So MVP is minimal viable product, and sort of the way I think about it, and anyone should think about all their startups, is doing everything as cheaply as possible. So if you fail cheaply. You know what I mean? So you don't want to invest in huge sums of money on each step. You want to make sure that those iterations work, there's customers there, and more importantly, there's paying customers. So that's something I learned on the problem, like who the payer are and who are the users. And those might be two separate things. For me, product market fit is taking that that there's something that consumers want to use and want to pay for, and kind of bringing those together. And so figuring that through iterative processes, and then developing, and that's a big factor in why for a technical co-founding project, I think it's important to, or a technical project like this, it's important to have a technical co-founder. I initially worked with some sort of pay for service type people, and then I realized, well, if anything needs to be changed, I got to go back to them and pay a huge sum of money, and it's going to change. You're going to get different feedback from your consumers. You're going to get deep from your market. And so that's just not a sustainable model you need to constantly iterate to what your feedback from your customers are and your payers. And so working on that is how I kind of see product market fit.
So that's great. Your plan is at some point in early 2025 to have a minimum viable product that can be tried out in some way. And no doubt there are competitors in the space, either from radiology or from other parts of medicine or from technology that might want to get into medicine. Where do you see this going in coming months and years?
So the first misconception about competition, I actually think it's sometimes good if you find other people in the field you're trying to work at, because that means they've sort of shown there's a market for that, and there are people willing to pay for it. But in my background research, a lot what I found is the people working on this are really working on the radiology end and not the frontline provider end. So I think that's a unique aspect of what we can provide. The way I see this going in the next 5-10 years, I want this to be like a stethoscope. I want every frontline provider just to, be able to put it up, take a picture of any x-ray for more confidence, is a tool in your toolkit to help improve healthcare outcomes. It's not going to replace anyone reading an x-ray. We're not going to replace any radiologist, but it's going to help people make better diagnosis and take better care of their patients. Other areas where I've gotten a lot of interest from, which kind of I didn't think about this, is international communities and clinics that don't have access to radiologists at all. So it's another tool that can be used there. And so I'm excited about the different implementations of this, whether it's education. We got a lot of interest from residents in med schools to use this as a way to learn how to read x-rays, or as a diagnostic tool. And that's where, as we talked about, the iteration and the customers are so important to see who your users are and be able to adapt to that.
Yeah, the Clearside AI is, I think it's, as people hear about this, our listeners and others, they certainly apply the potential need to their own lives, to their own clinical lives at the bedside, and they probably have a case they saw last night where they think, I could have used this. I assume you hear things like that pretty frequently. If someone wants to learn more about this in its development, how do they find it, learn about it, and get some more information and potentially help you?
So we have a website with a wait list for our prototype MVP device. It's clearsightai.tech. Or you can email me at patrick@clearsightai.tech. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me there. And I'm happy to talk with anyone. I've get a lot of feedback from residents and stuff who reach out, and I'm always excited to see emergency physicians in this space because I think we're very uniquely qualified to be entrepreneurials with the work we do.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, as a reminder, clearsightai.tech as the website. And yes, there's a waiting list, which always sounds bad, but is actually a good thing in your case because it's a waiting list to learn more about Clearsight AI and getting involved and helping out. And yes, I can tell you that Patrick is quite responsive on LinkedIn and has learned how to use it. And you can watch how he and others use it for your own potential venture. I think you and I both had the experience of meeting a physician and then searching for that person on LinkedIn and finding that maybe they signed up for an account 5 years ago and have two contacts because they're not using it, and that's unfortunately a great missed opportunity for them.
Yeah.
Tell us, do you have any other? I didn't really prep you for this question, but do you have another next thing that you've thought over the last few months? Boy, I'd really like to try that. Also, realizing you can't do too many things at once.
Well, of course I do. Well, first, I have a very supportive wife who understands that my brain never stops. I'm really working on, my issues. I have so many ideas and streamlining, being into Clearsight AI tech, but pharmacies and our opiate prescriptions I think there's a problem and there's a solution there. I don't know about you in Virginia, but we have to electronically prescribe all of our opiates, and the problem is we have no understanding of the supply at the pharmacy. So you'll e-prescribe something, the patient will go pick it up, then they don't have 5 milligram tablets of oxycodone, but they do have 10. I have no idea. So then the next day I get an angry call from a patient on a patient I didn't care for that wants me to solve this problem. I don't have any easy way to do that. The sitting on the phone with pharmacy, I don't have time for that while I'm working on a shift. It's an hour-long wait time to get there. So maybe I'll e-prescribe something else, and then they don't have that, and I get another call back an hour later. So I think that's a huge problem. I don't know how you'd come up with a solution. And I've had some conversations with pharmacists or head of pharmacy at my hospital just to start discussing, on a local level, what I can do at my shop to try to improve that problem, because it's definitely a patient care issue and it really upsets them. But that's, if anyone has interest in that, wants to reach out to me, happy to talk with them, or, if they want to steal it, go ahead. I haven't done anything with it. It's just an idea.
So that's great. I knew there was going to be something, and there probably are several somethings behind that, which I won't ask you to share the early development of those, but perhaps we'll have you back another time to talk about the successes of Clearsight AI and perhaps any potential growth at Expulsus, and then whatever the next idea is. So I really want to thank you very much for your time joining us today, and we will remind everyone how to contact you in the show notes.
Well, thank you, Till, and thank you for doing these talks. I mean, they're great. Recommend everyone go through them all. There's so much to learn from them, from all the great speakers you've had on, and appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Great, and best of luck in all the new ventures. And thank you for joining us in this installment of our M-Centric podcast series, The Shift Report. A special thanks to Dr. Patrick McCarville for sharing his important insights. For more content, networking, and innovation in the world of emergency medicine, please visit mcentric.org.